My honor to introduce Gary Gregory, a member of the PCADV Board of Directors and the president and founder of the Every Great Reason Foundation. This national organization has helped bring awareness of domestic violence to more than 1 million people and has directly impacted the lives of over 6,000 individuals. Most notably, Gary Gregory is the brother of Ellen Gregory Robb, who was murdered in 2006 by her husband, University of Pennsylvania professor Raphael Robb. Ellen's story was back in the public eye earlier this year when Raphael Robb was paroled after serving a 10-year sentence for her murder. This summer, Philadelphia Magazine published an in-depth story on Ellen's murder and the subsequent trial of Raphael Robb. Please join me now in welcoming Gary Gregory.
Good morning. It's an honor to be here today with so many of my colleagues from the board of PCADV, the dedicated staff, and those who are committed to the cause and mission from throughout the state, as well as those who are here working hard on our behalf as legislators and members of the government community. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about 5 things. And I'm really excited on this most solemn occasion because today represents a keynote for all across the Commonwealth to recognize victims of domestic violence and abuse. I'm going to cover 5 subjects for you. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my sister, as she represents, like the 100 victims you just heard about, a very special individual. Second, I want to talk to you a little bit about the horrific blight of domestic violence and abuse. The numbers will appall you. Third, the lessons learned from my sister's experience and how they impact our mission and cause and the work being done here in Harrisburg. And fourth, I want to tell you about the real-world progress that's being made here with PCADV and its 60-member organizations. And last but not least, we'll talk a little bit about what you and me, we can do to make a difference. First of all, a little bit about my sister. As I mentioned, she is representative of the 100 individuals that you just heard about. Anyone who knew my sister would tell you that she was the real deal. She was Pennsylvania, born and raised, or almost born and raised. She spent most of her life here. We grew up in Rosemont. She went to Radnor High School in Delaware County. She worked in Montgomery County most of her life. Was a mother and married to a University of Penn professor, Raphael Robb, who was a world-renowned game theorist in economics. And when you looked from afar, you'd say, that's a pretty idyllic life. If you knew Ellen, those would tell you that she was not only the real deal, but that she was incredibly warm, she was genuine, she was full of laughter. When she walked in a room, she would light it up, but not because she was focused on herself, but because she was always focused on others. She was quite simply the most giving and generous person I've ever met. Somebody described her once as saying that Ellen was like a comet, an amazing comet. When you see it, you're touched by it and will remember it forever. And someone else described Ellen as an angel on earth, quite appropriately. I miss her to this day. Let me tell you a little bit about a Christmas story. 10 years ago, my sister decided to get out of what we all thought was just a bad marriage. It was right around Christmas time, and she had finally decided to make the step forward. I was driving up to her house to pick her up with her daughter, 12-year-old daughter, and we were going to celebrate Christmas. We were going to celebrate her turning 50, and we were going to celebrate her beginning a new life over the holidays up in Boston. And as I drove up to her house, I want you to imagine these similar circumstances, someone you love dearly, who's done so much for you all your life, and you're driving up and you're so filled with optimism about her beginning a new life. And as you crest the hill, you see there's police tape quarantining the house. You jump out, You're confronted by an officer, he asks who you are, you tell them, and they say your sister is dead. And then you see them put her lifeless body in an ambulance. That moment is forever frozen in time for me and for our family. And at that moment, we descended into the world of domestic violence and abuse. Let me tell you a little bit about domestic violence and abuse. The numbers are appalling, and they require our urgent and continual focus to eradicate this horrific blight. Every 9 seconds, a woman is beaten. Every day in America, 3 women are killed. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men in their lifetime will experience domestic violence. 50% of all homeless women are a byproduct of domestic violence. Over half of the children living in homes with domestic violence and abuse are abused themselves. And the numbers go on and on and on. Employers bear the burden of $13 billion in cost, and the healthcare burden to victims and individuals approaches $5 billion a year. It is, quite frankly, an omnipresent blight, and it needs to be attacked with the same veracity as those who perpetrate abuse and violence on victims. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the lessons learned from my sister, because they speak a lot to where we need to go in this mission and movement. First of all, there's a classic power and control wheel that shows how domestic violence and abuse creeps and builds and takes control of these individuals. The question of why didn't they get out is really better understood when you look at the fact that abusers use physical means, verbal means, silence, financial means, and on to control their victims. And it erodes the person. Examples from my sister was being called a worthless piece of garbage every single day. My sister would clean the bathroom, and her husband would urinate in the sink right next to the toilet to exert his dominance. These little things erode a person's self-confidence and self-esteem, and it forced my sister, who was this vivacious, outgoing person, to be a recluse. Second thing, there is this water torture that occurs that happens over a period of time that creates mental quicksand. For years, my sister had questions like, how do I get out? What do I do about custody? Where will I live? Can I get a job? Can I pay the bills? Am I even strong enough to do this? These questions were eradicated in one single meeting. I took my sister to a lawyer, and in 30 minutes, she saw her path. 30 minutes. Physical signs. The emotional signs were there, and we had no clue. The physical signs we ignored. Bruises and statements like, oh, I'm so clumsy, I bumped into a cabinet, were just ignored. That's a key element, and it's really an element that has to be watched and monitored, and why awareness is so important. And then the last two things are flight time is danger time. When you go to leave, 50% of all fatalities occur within that period or the year following, and it is a most dangerous time, and we had no clue. I literally stayed in a hotel 3 minutes from my sister's house the evening before I picked her up, or was to pick her up and begin her new life. And last but not least is rights. And since my sister's death, we have had to fight vehemently and ardently, and with the support of many here today, have had many victories that we're going to talk about. All of those lessons learned distill into 3 things that are the mission of PCADV and its 60 member organizations. And they are, first and foremost, prevention, awareness, is the powerful tool that allows individuals to know if you're in an abusive relationship, I should reach out and talk to one of the member organizations across the state. If I know someone who is subject to abuse, I should get them in contact with them. Here are the signs and symptoms. Oh my goodness, Ellen's in an abusive relationship. This isn't just a bad marriage, this is a dangerous marriage. That's the first element. The second element is intervention. Like I mentioned, one 30-minute meeting changed my sister's life. Intervention is carried forward in the work that's done throughout the Commonwealth and led by PCADV. It's things like having response teams that go to with police to a scene, a crime scene, come to the ER or go to the police station to help victims at their critical juncture in time. It's establishing those plans to get out. It's providing the legal resources and work that is needed for these victims to get free. And the last thing is change. The work being done in the leadership by PCADV to help revise the agenda and revise the rules of the road for victims and allow them to become survivors needs the support of the legislators. We need your help to make a difference. Now, the real-world progress on all three of those fronts stands here before you. It is the work that's being done by PCADV with the No More campaign on prevention, on awareness with the Fathers and Sons Day program. It's done on a daily basis with the members behind us from the 60 organizations across the state that get the word out to high schools, to colleges, to PTA organizations, and to the community. Intervention is what happens every day under PCADV and the member organizations. 90,000 individuals are served each year, directly served through the work done by PCADV and its members. And last but not least, change. Change is where we turn the tide. We need to change the rules of the road for the abusers so that victims have equal footing and they can step forward and have the resources and pathway to go towards emancipation. Last thing I'm going to tell you about is about a real-world example of progress on a personal level. And I get asked a lot, how do you feel about this? It's been literally 10 years since your sister was killed in the most brutal killing in the history of Montgomery County in a half a century. And the burden can be really heavy. And if you don't think about the positives, you can think about the story as this. My sister was abused for years. When she finally went to get out, she was killed. Her perpetrator, the criminal, pled his way down to manslaughter and a 5 to 10 year sentence. He was paroled after 5 years and days away from being set free. And today he walks free on the streets in Pennsylvania while we serve a lifetime sentence. I'll give you the other side of this story, and this is an example of what we can do together. The other side of the story is that she saw her way out, and in her last few months on earth, she was her old self again. She was emancipated. When her killer, my ex-brother and a former brother-in-law, was about to be paroled, with the help of many in this room, we created a storm that said, we will not allow this to happen. And for the first time in the history of Pennsylvania, parole was rescinded. We then took that momentum and through Mike Verab's leadership and Todd Stevens and many in this room, created a law affectionately called Ellen's Law that allows the victim and their family to stand in front of the parole board now and have a voice in the process with equal footing as the criminals. And under Jen Storm's direction, that law has served now over 6,000 individuals and counting every single month. And last but not least, we've created awareness that has helped others in desperate need. Awareness that if I had had it, I wouldn't be here today. My sister would be talking to you. That is the upside in what we can do together, and that is why I joined PCADV, because when I first found out about this tragedy of my sister's, and I'm in my hotel room trying to write her eulogy, I turned to my wife and I said, we can't let this tragedy stand as Ellen's legacy. And we decided to create a foundation and join in the movement to fight domestic violence and abuse. And then I quickly learned the backbone of the fight, the backbone of the emancipation of individuals is in an organization like PCADV, which is the nation's first and oldest of its kind, and a leader across the country, and its 60 members who provide direct services to victims. So there you have it. We've covered a lot of ground. We've gotten a little flavor for one of the victims of over 100 in the past year and over 1,500 who have been killed since my sister was killed. We've got an understanding of how horrific this blight is, how much it requires our time and attention. We understand the lessons learned and the pathway of prevention, intervention, and change that must occur. And last but not least, we see a shining example of what you, what me, what we can do together to make a difference and end domestic violence. Thank you very much for your time. God bless you. God bless my sister Ellen.